Welcome, everybody, to our next free call for tapping out of trauma. We always do these calls just before we're about to launch a new class, and our next class is starting September 14th. So today we're interviewing Sharon King, all the way from the UK. Welcome, Sharon.
Thank you.
And it's really hot over there. So she's got the swept look effect from a fan that's on her right now. So we hope that you'll be able to stay cool enough to finish this interview. A little bit about Sharon. She's the creator of Matrix Birth Reimprinting, which is an evolutionary protocol that enables us to rewrite our birth experience. And everybody, or many people around the world are coming to understand that how much our world is affected both physically and emotionally by things that happen to us around birth. And Sharon shares that by rewriting our births with this powerful tool, we're able to impact our well-being in many significant ways. She's worked with thousands of people all over the world to rewrite their birth stories, and often with remarkable impacts on their life in present time. So, and she's taught practitioners, and now she's teaching midwives how to help others transform their experience of being in utero and birth too. She also works with pregnant women to help them have an empowered natural birth, and with parents whose children experience birth traumas. So Sharon, we welcome you very much. Oh, and I should say, she's written a great new book, which is called, I don't know if you can see it, Heal Your Birth and Heal Your Life. And Sharon King, that's what we want you to see. And also she has a great website called magicalnewbeginnings.com. So please check her out. She's an amazing woman, and there's lots of things that you should know about her that we don't have time to talk about today. So anyway, let's get started. So Sharon, we know that you, how involved you are with birth and perinatal trauma as the founder of the Matrix Birth Reimprinting. Tell us how you got involved with that specialty.
Okay, well, that's not a short story, but I will try and make it as short as I can, but give you the edited highlights. So it all started with me learning EFT and Matrix Reimprinting, and I was on a one-day workshop with Carl, and he asked me to work with this pregnant lady called Caroline, who was 5 months pregnant, and she was in fear of giving birth to her third child. So when I sat her down, I just asked her, tell me about that fear, describe that fear to me. And she said, well, I've had 2 births before, I've given birth to 2 beautiful boys. She said, but the labors were horrible. She said they were both very long, they were both intensive. I had medical procedures done to me that I didn't want, I didn't sign up for, I wanted a natural birth. And consequently, I had trouble breastfeeding afterwards. She said, and after the first traumatic birth experience, she said, I was in fear giving birth to my second child, but the doctor promised me and said, don't worry, no 2 births are ever the same. The next one will be different. But it wasn't. It was exactly the same. So what is she meant to think? The third one's going to be the same as the first 2.
Yeah.
So what we did is we went back to that time using Matrix Reimprinting, and we worked with her younger self, and of course using the EFT tapping on her younger self to work through her fears. So for instance, the first fear that she had was the fact that she was trapped sitting on a table because she had the induction in her arm. So she couldn't get up and move around. Intuitively, her body was saying, you need to get up, you need to move around, and she couldn't. She also had a baby monitor on monitoring her baby's heartbeat, and that kept dipping. So every time she heard the heartbeat dip, she would go into anxiety. So we worked on that trauma, we released the energy around it, and very naturally, the sound of the heartbeat started sounding like gentle waves lapping on a beach. because every time she went into fear, of course, her baby was picking that up too, and the heartbeat was dipping even more. The next point of trauma came when the midwife kept saying to her, look, you're only 3 centimeters dilated. You really should have an epidural. You've been in labor a long time. You know, you're getting tired. And talk about implanting beliefs into her. And she's going, no, 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 I want a natural birth. I want to do this naturally. And in the end, she had so much pressure, or felt like she was being pressurized. She gave in and said, okay, I'll have the epidural. 2 hours it took for the anaesthetist to come, but he came, he did the epidural. Midwife checked her after the epidural had been administered, and then he said, or she said, oh, okay, so now you're 10 centimeters dilated. You could have given birth naturally, but hey, you're not going to feel it now. Yay. And she was like, that in that moment, she completely lost trust of her midwife. Like, well, you know, I feel conned. So anyway, so we worked all around that, and we sent the midwife out. We got a new midwife in who happened to be an angel called Annie. And we ended up just naturally, this just evolved out of its own natural way of being, as things can happen when you're using Matrix Reimprinting, is that the birth just continued from that point onwards very naturally. She picked her baby up, she bonded with her baby, she breastfed with her baby, and we re-imprinted that picture. Then we ended up going back, asking Caroline, her older self, where do we need to go to next? And we ended up back at Caroline's own birth. So we worked there, and when she stepped into the picture and connected with her mother, she realized that her mother had exactly the same fear as she did. So we tapped on Mum. We asked Mum if she wanted anybody to come in and support her. Mum wanted her own mother to come in. That caused all sorts of havoc because they weren't getting on very well. So we had to tap on grandmother, we had to tap on mother. Then they were in harmony together. Baby Caroline, we tapped on baby Caroline in the womb as well. So we did our little EFT tapping, even though you're feeling all of mum's fear. And then again, once again, the birth process just continued naturally. She was laying in her mum's arms. She was breastfeeding with mum. I was just about to go, yay, great picture, let's reimprint this. And she goes, oh, but I've got all this energy in my chest. She said, I am feeling this feeling of anxiety. And it was like, okay, that's not meant to be happening. We were just about to reimprint. So it's like, okay, tune into that energy. Where does that energy go back to? And what she consciously knew was that she had been separated from her mum after birth because she had yellow jaundice. Mum had to go home in the evenings or at night to look after her older brother, but she would express enough milk for her during the day so the nurses could feed her at night. Now, a lot of people listening might think, well, you know, that's a good plan, but baby Caroline was missing her mother. So we tapped on baby Caroline, we made sure that she was safe and secure, and we asked baby Caroline, what did she need in order to feel safe and secure in this moment? And now with my logical mind, I'm thinking, oh, she's going to choose to go home with mum, or we bring mum into the picture. And we didn't. She wanted Angel Annie to come in and be with her. So that was the picture we re-imprinted. And then we went to her second son's birth. And literally there wasn't much to do there because we'd cleared all the energy around the first birth and they were so similar. The only difference was when Jamie was coming out, the midwife had to turn him because he wasn't in the right position and left him with an injury to his neck. So we tapped on Jamie, we tapped on younger Caroline to help her relax more and open more so Jamie could get out easily. We swapped the midwife for Angel Annie, went through the birthing process, went through the bonding process, went through the re-imprinting process, job done. So that was like 3 births that we had done in probably it took us about an hour or so, if not a little bit longer. And I kept being drawn to her tummy. And I know that in Matrix Reimprinting that we do a lot of future work as well. So I just said to her, you know, how would it be if we showed your baby how the birth was going to be in the future? And she said, well, yes, that'd be amazing. She said, but actually, as it happens, on the drive over here, I was thinking about where I wanted to give birth, who I wanted to be there when I was giving birth, how I wanted it to go. So she'd already had all of this in her mind. So I said, right, let's just show the baby how it's going to be. So we connected with the baby. We told the baby this was not happening right now. Auntie Sharon is not a real midwife. This is something that happens in four months' time. You know, you get to stay in and grow a bit more. And literally with her mind and her visualization, she showed the baby how it was going to be. She went through the bonding process. She breastfed the baby. And again, we re-imprinted that picture. Now, I cannot even begin to tell you how high we were after doing that process. I mean, the energy was amazing. So that was one of those sessions that I kind of thought, you know, that was really amazing, and didn't think much more of it until Carl Dawson sent me a message and just said, oh, just thought I'd let you know, Caroline's had a baby boy. So I emailed him back and I said, how was the birth? And he emailed me back and said, I don't know, I'm a man, I didn't ask. Here's Caroline's email, contact her. So I emailed Caroline, said, congratulations. Glad that, you know, I'm having a little boy. Hope everything went well. How was the birth? You know, I'm here if you want to talk. And she just emailed back and said, we need to talk. So it was like, oh, okay, it didn't go very well. You know, your negative mind starts getting into that stuff. So anyway, so I got her on the phone and we arranged to talk. And she said, and I said to her, how was the birth? How was the birth? And she said, whoa. She said, slow down. Let me tell you what the changes were after the session, after we did that session together, and then I'll tell you about the birth. So I'm thinking, okay, so I need to be a little bit patient here. So she said, the first thing that happened, she said, is I just felt amazing. I had no fear whatsoever of giving birth. She said, my husband even noticed how happy I was. She said, people were noticing how much more connected we were as a family. Jamie was no longer saying that he had a problem with his neck, so the pain in his neck went. She said, now her husband was a captain of a football team, quite a famous football team here in the UK, Birmingham City. And every time he went to go and play away, she would incite an argument before he would go. And she never understood why she did that, but she had to have a row with him before he went away, and that no longer happened. And what she realized is his going away to play football was triggering her separation anxiety that she experienced at birth.
Wow.
So that was no longer happening. She said, yeah, and then the birth itself, she said the birth was exactly how she showed the baby it was going to be. She had no trouble, you know, giving birth. It was a very natural birth, no medical intervention, breastfed very easily. She completely felt empowered throughout the whole of the process. And her baby, Archie, was just the most happy, peaceful baby you could wish to have. And she subsequently went on to have another boy. I think they're going for their own football team. She went on to have another boy in exactly the same way, you know, beautiful birth, great bonding experience. And that was the moment that I went, this is exciting. This is what I want to do. I can, you know, I can recreate this for everybody else.
Wow. Thank you so much for sharing. That's amazing. Just amazing in so many different aspects. I'm wondering, do you see more growing acceptance of the work that you're doing in sort of mainstream circles with the amazing results that you're getting?
I'm getting more, I have been asked to teach a group of independent midwives, and that's probably about as far as it's gone mainstream at the moment, but it is slowly getting out there. You know, there's a beautiful ex-midwife, but she's now a neonatal nurse that's focuses on working with premature babies in New Zealand. And, you know, through her telling the stories of what she's learned on the birth, things like this, then when I go over to New Zealand, I'm going to be talking to them directly. So it's one of those things that are very gently, just by the people doing the experiences, sharing it with their work colleagues, and then I think it's just very gently getting out there at the moment. I've not had anybody sort of directly at the moment. You know, I do get doulas, midwives, doctors come on my courses. So, you know, I think it's just filtering out slowly.
That's great.
So Sharon, I just want to broaden it beyond just the Matrix Birth Reimprinting, the idea of perinatal psychology, the idea of working with trauma surrounding birth. Of course, this is a profound way of working with, but it's not only, are you seeing the field of understanding the importance of, you know, it used to be the psychology of an infant basically wasn't acknowledged. So I'm just wondering, as a whole, regarding birth trauma, if you're starting to see that reach a tipping point of understanding and starting to spread as well.
I think at the moment, what seems to be happening is there is a lot of people now starting to understand the importance of mental health. So we've got to that point where people are looking at our mental health and looking at some of the traumas in our childhood. Of course, you've got people like Dr. William Emerson and, you know, all of those great people, David Chamberlain, have all been talking about all of this stuff for years. It is becoming more accepted. It is becoming more, people are becoming more aware that babies are conscious beings. You know, a lot of David Chamberlain works and Joseph Chilton Pearce's work is actually, you know, emphasize that, and people are starting to realize that actually, you know what, I have to take time to connect with my baby and be with my baby. But then we're also living in such a stressful world that people are getting further and some people are getting further and further away from connection and connecting with their mobile phones and technology rather than their own babies. So in some aspects, that it's like this, I don't know, it's like this divide's going on at the moment where some people are completely into it and totally understand it and totally get it, and other people are going, no, that's a load of rubbish. So I think we're kind of 50-50 at the moment, and I don't know that we've reached that tipping point yet. I mean, you may know differently, but that's no,
I'm asking your perspective. Sure. I mean, I'm familiar with the great work that the Association of Perinatal Health and Psychology is doing, APA and others. And it seems to be certainly a growing consciousness. But when we talk about trauma related to pregnancy and birth, I think some people might have one particular perspective. So when people come to you and there's around the birth process, both for the mom, for the child, et cetera, like what are we speaking about when we're talking about traumas around the birth process? Perhaps you can give some insight to ways people aren't even thinking, well, that was traumatic. So I'm wondering if maybe you could just address some of the traumatic issues that you see involved in the work you do.
Okay. Yes, it's quite interesting, the level of, you know, people think that, you know, they go into hospital, they have the induction, they have the epidural, which then quite often leads to the C-section or the forceps delivery, and they think that they've had a good birth. Every part of that process is trauma. Every part of it can be trauma, but it's also, as Craig, as you know, when we look around the beliefs, it's what we make that mean to us. You know, so for some people that is a good birth, and to other people that was like highly traumatic because that's not how they wanted birth to be. And you know, the thing that I work a lot with women, and it's just coming up time and time again, even my client today, is we often start off with the grief of this is how birth was, you know, how it feels like they go in with this idea of having a natural birth and it doesn't happen that way. So there's a massive grief that they didn't get to have the natural birth that they wanted. So part of the work that I do is all around education of how to achieve a natural birth, because so many people still at the moment are going into the hospitals and expecting the doctors to just take care of them, and they're not researching what they need to do. They're not setting themselves up to succeed in this area. And, you know, part of the work that I do is educating them and what needs to happen in order to have a natural birth, and why birth goes wrong. You know, why does it go wrong? It quite often goes wrong as soon as you have the medical intervention, or as soon as the woman goes into fear, like Caroline losing trust with her midwife. That's massive. You know, you can have still in this day and age quite a lot of authoritarian, you know, birthing assistants that put the person down. You're not working hard enough. You're not pushing hard enough. And also what I'm seeing is that birth is one of those times that if you've got any negative beliefs running, like I'm not good enough, I'm wrong, I'm not safe, any one of those can get triggered, and it's like, because this is such a heightened time, it seems like it's almost like those negative beliefs come to the fore very, very quickly.
Are you speaking about the beliefs of the mom? Because I'm looking
Yeah.
at not just, because when we're talking about trauma, I'm just not looking at delivery.
Yeah.
We're looking at traumas during pregnancy and things that are happening in their life. We're looking during the delivery process. We're looking immediately post. So I just wanted to kind of get a sense of the scope of the things that you tend to work with that you would consider traumatic, other than what you were just saying so well, was the unmet expectations of the delivery process.
Yeah. So there are so many areas that you can work in this area. So let's just start at the beginning, conception. You know, there's so there's so many women that are not doing what I would call a conscious conception. So and there's so many people that, you know, we're finding out earlier and earlier that we're pregnant. You know, you can now do tests at 4 weeks. So that shock of actually finding out that you're pregnant, and maybe, you know, this isn't part of your life plan at the moment, just that shock of finding out you're pregnant, the baby is going to be registering that as a, oh my God, I'm not wanted. I'm wrong for being here. And then if the mother starts talking about contemplating a termination, adoption, thinking about all the different scenarios, how this is going to impact her life, all of a sudden that then becomes a really big survival threat for the baby. So you can start as early as conception and find that there's impact on your belief system and impact on your life that early. Mum then goes on and finds out that she's having a girl instead of a boy. You know, in a lot of cultures, that is massive, because in a lot of cultures, the boys are king and the girls are worthless. So that can have a massive impact on us as babies. Anything that happens to mum while she's pregnant, you know, may or may not have anything to do with the pregnancy. You know, I was working with a lady the other day who has actually had really bad, I can't remember the technical name of it, and Craig, you might know, the morning sickness, that it's just like, it's not just morning, it goes all the way through, and she was really ill with it. You know, that is of an effect, has an effect on the baby too. Right the way through birth, but of course there's infertility, there's what happens after birth, postnatal depression, or postpartum depression as you guys call it over there. So loss of a child, you know, if you can just imagine, like, you know, you've had a couple of miscarriages and then you're pregnant again, so you're going to go through that throughout the whole of that pregnancy, being fearful, am I going to lose this baby? And that's going to set the baseline for that baby to be fearful of loss, fearful of death, fearful of life, which sets up a real conflict for people. So it's like massive. It's such a massive area, and, you know, for the baby, this is what I call the foundation. This is the foundation of who we are, and the earlier the trauma comes, the deeper it and the more effect it has on our foundation of who we are.
Great, thank you.
So Sharon, we're wondering, what about those people who don't know about their birth or have never been told that they had birth trauma, but how might that show up as they are an adult? What kinds of problems or issues may have birth trauma as a starting point?
So I'll give you, it's everything that shows up in your life, how you are in the world, I believe goes back to those really early years. So I had a client come to see me, and he wasn't even thinking about birth, but he said to me, look, I feel stuck in life. He said, I just can't move forward. I can't form relationships. I've got anxiety. I quite often will have panic attacks. Tell me about what triggers the panic attacks. Whenever I feel stuck, whenever I'm in an enclosed space. Yeah, whenever I feel held down. Now, we went back through his conscious memory, if you like, on tell me about when you were stuck, when you were trapped, when you were held down. And we got to a time when he'd injured his head, and the doctors were trying to stitch him up without anaesthetic, and his father was panicking, and the child was panicking, and his father had to physically restrain him in order to stitch him up. That then went back to a memory when he was 1 year old, when he had a UTI, urinary tract infection. He was in hospital all alone. Parents weren't allowed to stay with him. And of course, they held him down to do procedures to him. Because he's 1 year old, they don't figure that he needs anything.
Right.
Which then bounces back to a newborn baby being circumcised, which then bounces back to being in the womb, getting stuck in the womb, not being able to come out. Mm-hmm. Now, this guy has anxiety and panic attacks in his life linked to being stuck, not being able to move forward, not being able to form relationship, because, you know, especially around the 1 year old, we found that he lost a lot of trust of his mum and the circumcision and a little bit of the birth as well. But I think mainly we've just at the moment just worked with the 1 year old. So his loss of trust, his not being able to form relationships, his almost PTSD symptoms, you know, this guy is now like had to give up his job.
Wow.
And so it can just be something as simple as, like, for myself, when I was writing my book, I asked my mum about my birth, and she said, well, you know, you were coming out at great speed. The midwife said, we need to slow you down, otherwise you're going to tear, to my mum. So they pumped her full of pethidine, which is a narcotic drug. And my mum has got no tolerance for drugs or alcohol. One glass of wine and she's, you know, asleep on the sofa. So pethidine just knocked her out. So all of a sudden, I'm ready to come into the world. I'm coming. And then whoosh, I get hit by the pethidine too. The world starts going really woozy, and I have to then, once I come round for that, I have to fight my way out. I'm now on my own. I'm doing this on my own. When I come out, Mum said she held me for a minute or two, and then she needed to sleep off the rest of the pethidine. So I was put in the nursery for 5 hours while she slept off the pethidine. Now, all my life, I've been pretty resentful because my mum's not been there for me, never knowing why. Mm. When I was writing my book, the first 20 minutes, I'd sit down and write. After 20 minutes, it's doof. I'd like, oh my God, this wave of tiredness will come over me.
Wow.
So it can be something as dramatic as the client I just said with the panic attacks and anxiety, or it can be just something as simple as every time if I feel under pressure, because, you know, my negative beliefs were really going at me when I was writing my book, felt under pressure and I just space out, I just go to sleep, I just shut down.
So interesting, things can become a metaphor, like feeling stuck, you know, to think about, oh, wow, how, you know, all these metaphors around birth and exactly. How that could lead back.
Within the first 5 minutes of a conversation with somebody, they'll tell me about their birth and they won't even realize. Tell me about your life, you know. What's your relationship with money? You know, are you stuck? You know, how you know, what are your problems? As in, like, you know, can you get yourself out there, or are you afraid to be seen, or do you know what I mean? There's just everything. I promise you, nearly everything will go back to either in utero birth or those first really early ages. So
it's like the blueprints happen at the birth and then get followed through in the rest of life in different ways. So that's great.
Sorry,
and
go
ahead.
Can I just add something else in there
of course.
as well?
Yeah, sure.
It's also what goes into our foundation on our blueprint is as babies we perceive the world through the mum's perception of the world. So not only are we forming our own beliefs around that, but we're also taking on our mother's beliefs, and we don't have that brain function in order to be able to distinguish what's ours and what belongs to mum. We're just in that soup of emotion, and that every thought, feeling, and emotion is shaping the baby how it's going to be in the world. So a lot of our negative beliefs that we've got, like I'm not safe, which was my big one, actually came from my mother as well.
Got it.
So,
yeah.
Okay. So the examples you just gave were wonderful because the person was able to get in touch with things that happened, or you had information that your mom offered. But sometimes people, number one, they've never inquired. They certainly don't remember much.
No,
perhaps their parents haven't given them much information, or they're passed on, and now they're at the stage in the life that they're starting to inquire. And it's like a blank slate, and it's like, how am I going to work with my birth? I don't know what happened.
Or they were adopted and never knew.
Or they were adopted is another one. So how is it now? You know, just for those people, I just want to backtrack for a second, because you started right in the first question with talking about the process you've developed with with Matrix Birth Reimprinting, and not everybody that
Yeah.
is listening has taken that, which is, you know, a type of tapping modality that becomes more imaginative and creative, et cetera. That's a lot of what you were describing from Matrix Reimprinting protocols. But so given that not everybody that's listening or watching right now knows what that is, can you just give a little bit of insight for those people that feel like, how can I work with a birth that I really don't know much about?
So everybody, nearly everybody, apart from what Suzanne quite rightly said, some adopted people don't know about their birth story.
Mm-hmm.
So what I would normally do, if somebody came to me specifically for a birth, so let's
Mm-hmm.
just say it wasn't like I feel stuck in life and I can't move forward and I'm having panic attacks, I would just gently question, okay, so what do you consciously know about your birth? And they go, I know nothing. And then I say, okay, so do you know whether you were a hospital birth or a home birth? Oh, I know I was born in a hospital. Okay, so we have that bit of information. So do you know whether you were a natural birth, or do you know whether you were, you know, forceps, C-section, whatever? And most people will know whether there was forceps involved, or mum may have actually said to them, oh, you know, I'm sure, I know Sasha said this publicly, but her mum recounted the story. The only thing she consciously knew about her birth is what her mum kept telling her, was that she split her mum open when she was coming out. So she felt the guilt of that all her life, and that's the only thing she really knew about her
Mm-hmm.
birth. So we would just start there. You just need one starting point.
Okay.
Now, Suzanne, you asked about somebody not knowing anything whatsoever. They absolutely know nothing. So I would just get them to tap, okay, so my birth story. If I knew my birth story, where in my body am I holding my birth story? And you start with that body feeling. Now, it becomes very difficult with EFT if somebody's just cut off from their body. You know, oh, it's all in my head, it's all in my head. So you know that they've cut off from their body. There's been a trauma somewhere along the line, whether it's birth or later in childhood, where they've cut off. But most people will be able to tune into the body. They will feel it in their body. And that would be, you know, that's when I start, what, you know, the typical, what color, what shape is it? If it had a voice, what would it be saying? You know, getting into all the metaphors and, you know, what's the emotion in there? And, you know, and we can also just work out from what they're presenting in life is, well, you know, you probably were stuck at some point, or maybe you did need to be helped to be coming out, you know, and there's lots of different psychological effects of different births. Some of them overlap each other, some of them are different. So just tune into your own body, into your own knowing. And if you're one of these people that's had so much trauma that you are so disassociated, then work with somebody and let somebody guide you to at least get you back into your body enough so you can start feeling where this is in your body. I always describe it as, you know, our bodies are like a computer and we're a desktop, and you've got the little icon for I don't know, Word and Excel, and you have programs within that. So if you double click on Excel, it opens it up. So we double click on our body feeling, it opens that bit of information. Then we want to go and find a specific document, a document that says conception or a document that says birth. And, you know, we just keep tapping until that information comes in. The information is kind of always in your subconscious anyway. We just invite it to come in closer. And even just listening to the stories that I've been talking about, tune in to how that's making you feel and tap on that.
Yeah, it's really interesting. That's a good way to go in. I had a client who was a test tube baby.
Mm-hmm.
And that was a very interesting thing to see what she came up, and she knew that.
Yes.
But it was very interesting to see what she discovered as a result of patterns in her life from that.
And what did she discover?
Well, her big thing was about never feeling at home.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
You know, there was no place to land.
Exactly. And that makes total sense.
Yeah.
One of the ladies that I worked with who was a test tube baby, she, in her relationship, she always managed to find a man that had another woman. So there was always 3 of them in a relationship.
Wow. Fascinating.
Yeah, because
Yeah.
So of course, you know, it's your mum and your dad that create you, but with a test tube baby, there's always a third party involved.
Right.
Or a surrogate, and that would be another interesting thing too.
Sure.
Yeah. Anyway,
Okay.
This is so interesting. We could go on for hours. I think you already answered that question. Craig, you want to go to
Sure.
the next one down?
Yeah. I just made some notes, so I wanted to make sure we covered everything. What I would like to find out is the idea, and I already somewhat know what I think you're going to say, but the work you do primarily now is through the reimprinting process. But not every energy psychology tapping practitioner out there has taken matrix reimprinting, let alone matrix reimprinting for birth.
Yeah.
You know, your specialty. So what have you found, either other people or yourself, in what ways can you use tapping or other types of modalities other than matrix reimprinting if you haven't? Now, of course, we're going to encourage people to learn that because it's so powerful, but perhaps you can give some perspective on how one might use and work with birth trauma if they haven't yet learned that.
I mean, there are a number of modalities. Hypnosis, I think, is the obvious one. Most people, you know, if you go in and have a hypnosis session, will quite often land back into birth. I mean, David Chamberlain's book was all about, you know, the mind of the newborn baby, was all about taking his clients back to there. I would just sit and just imagine, you know, just tune in to the feeling of it and just imagine, just tune into yourself as a baby. And just imagine how you're feeling. You know, you can do this in the first person. Just be very careful that if you know you've had a traumatic birth, I wouldn't recommend you go to your birth. But what was it like in the womb? You know, and just start asking yourself some gentle questions. How connected did I feel to mum? And whatever emotion that brings up, I would do some tapping on it.
So you could tap on the disappointment. You could tap on the grief. You could tap on whatever resentment that you're holding.
Not feeling loved, not feeling connected, you know, the separation. If you know that, like me, you were separated from your mum at birth, you know, the resentment, you know, the first thing was, you know, my mum's not there for me. Yeah, she's not there for me. She, you know, she was asleep. You know, she let me down. I had to do this all on my own. And you could do some tapping like that. Or, you know, you can just imagine, you know, what it was like to be that baby, and just work with the energy that you're feeling. So it could be, you know, this pain in my chest, or this separation feeling in my chest, and just do some simple tapping like that.
And certainly as a parent, you know, especially mom, but really parent and partner, guilt that it didn't go the way they wanted, grief that it did, right? So all those things around the birth process as the deliverer, so to speak.
You know, and I always like to get this in at some point when I'm doing a talk. If you're a mother listening to this, and not sort of having even thought about really that your baby was conscious through the whole of that process, then just know that you were doing the best you could with the knowledge and understanding you had at the time. You know, again, that's so important to understand that just because we have this knowledge now, we didn't have that X amount of years ago. And, so, you know, I just want to put that in there too. But yeah, mothers get very traumatized. I have had some really horrific stories told to me by, you know, some horrific things that have been either done to or said to, or outcomes of, you know, birth, and stuff that's happened just afterwards as well. You know, just one example, there's a baby that had a beautiful birth. Mum was breastfeeding the baby. They had trouble at the hospital because the bed wouldn't go right back, and they needed to stitch her up, and she still had the baby. The midwife was holding a torch so the surgeon could see to stitch her up. And
a flashlight. Thank you.
America.
Yes, sorry, flashlight. Does torch mean something else in America? Okay, a flashlight.
Yes, something with a big flame at the end. Yeah.
Right. Okay. Yes. No, not something with a something you put batteries in and shine a light with. And so she said to the midwife, "Oh, is my baby okay? Is Jack okay? Because he's gone really floppy." And the midwife looked over and goes, "Yeah, Jack's fine. Don't worry, he's just gone to sleep." Anyway, 20 minutes later, they found out that the baby had suffocated.
Oh man.
So, but they managed to revive him, and he was on life support, and they kept telling her that he wasn't going to survive, etc., etc., etc. And he did survive, and I started working with her when he was 3 months old, and he was laying on the mat. He had a feeding tube down his nose. They still didn't believe, or they still were being told that he wasn't going to survive. And he had a feeding tube because he didn't have a suck reflex. And as we start working through the trauma, we start hearing him on the mat doing the sucking reflex. And straight after the session, she pulled that feeding tube out and she bottle fed him. And he's now living in America, having all sorts of different treatments. She's gone on and had another baby, so I supported her through going through and having another baby. They've taken the stem cells from the placenta of the other baby to help Jack with stem cell research. But, you know, when I saw him when I was in Santa Rosa, he was walking, he was talking, he gave me a big kiss. He was, you know, he's fully responsive. He's having all these amazing things happening. But we, you know, we had to go through bit by bit by bit of all the trauma that happened and all the subsequent trauma that happened after that. And, you know, he's now a thriving, beautiful little 3-year-old. So, so it's not always about the birth. It can be what happens afterwards and what happens in the womb, and of course the trauma for her and trauma for dad. You know, I know
Yes.
Craig, you wanted to talk about fathers too, but you know, that is so traumatic for a husband. And if you've got a you know, if your partner has had a lot of trauma in their life, then you know, this can lead to PTSD for them, can lead to PTSD for the mother, but it can also set up future possibilities of PTSD for the baby.
Wow. Thanks. Okay, now I'm going to ask you more sort of, well, maybe for some more esoteric question. I know that one of your other loves and interests is around color therapy.
Yes.
And I know that you use color a lot in matrix work. So wondering if you could talk a little bit about why you feel that's such a wonderful adjunct modality to combine with matrix.
Yeah, and it's also really useful for EFT practitioners too, because when you're starting off in a session, you usually just ask, what's the color? That's one of the basic questions that I was taught. What's the color for that? You know, where do you feel it in the body? What color's that energy? Mm-hmm. I'm guessing, Craig, you guys still teach that? The color of the energy in the body or not?
Not in a general EFT training. That's not necessarily where we go with that. There are times that there's certain processes when we're using chasing the pain, for example, we're going into much more detail, but generally we're sticking primarily with the emotion as the focus, but there are times that we do, and certainly in Matrix and certainly in chasing the pain, but I wouldn't say I use it in all my techniques.
Okay.
I use it more probably than, but
yeah. I know you've done some of my
And I would tend to also offer that a more visual processing practitioner would probably be more akin to using that more often as well, because they feel more connected and rapport with that processing skill.
So
anyway, go ahead.
In my color training that I've had when I did the color mirror training, I learned the psychology of color. So what does color mean to us? And color gives us so much information. And color can give us information about whether it's in the negative. So I always find out what is the blocking energy. So whether it's quite often red, or it can be black. It's usually red, black. It can be sometimes it's a yucky yellow, for instance. Do you know what I mean? It's not a bright, vibrant yellow. It's a yucky yellow, people would describe it as. So I know that the next question I'll ask, what color needs to come in and lift and lighten that energy? So you've got a blocking energy, you've got a lightening, healing energy. So let's just say it's red energy and the emotion is fear. Mm-hmm. And then I ask them what color needs to come in for safety. Mm-hmm. And they may choose yellow, or they may choose pink, or they may choose another red. And I know what that red energy means, and I know what the healing color means and what happens when they combine. So it just gives you the understanding of being able to ask the next question, if you like. So red, if you think about, most people now know about our energy centers or chakras or whatever you want to call them now. You know, red is your base chakra color. So this is all about safety, security. It's the lower vibration of color, whereas up here the violet, you know, is the higher frequency. So it's all about frequency. So you've got a blocking frequency, and you've got a frequency that you bring in to heal it. So just try that, you know, just think about more when you're working with your clients or yourself. What color is the blocking energy? What color do I need to bring in to lift and lighten it? And you don't even need to know the psychology of color, although it does help. So I'll give you another example. Pink is always a color that people will bring in, or quite often will bring in as a color to heal separation from mother's love, separation from love. You very, very rarely have pink as a blocking color, but black is usually a color that indicates some form of really, really deep trauma.
Mm-hmm.
Could be sexual trauma, could be abuse. Quite often it's abuse. And orange is the color that heals abuse, but it can also be an indication that there has been a lot of abuse there as well. So I was working on one of my trainings, somebody had this black energy and they couldn't shift it. No matter how much tapping they were doing, it still was black. It was still the same shape. It wouldn't move. And I just came in and said, what color do you need? She said orange, brought the orange in. Poof, she suddenly got back to a memory of when she'd have been abused as a child. But it wasn't safe to go there until she brought the orange energy in.
Right.
And of course, the orange energy is the healing energy. So in Matrix terms, what I usually do is I always send that safe energy back down the timeline in order to get back to your younger self, to find out where you need to go for this presenting thing, whatever it is that you're wanting to work on. So I just use color as a healing frequency. It's like tapping, you know, when you tap, it creates a frequency. And color is the language of our nervous system. It's the language of our subconscious, you know. So you're speaking, when you're going into the metaphors, you're speaking directly to the subconscious, and colors are such a fabulous way of doing it. Beautiful. I'm just laughing at my laptop here because it's gone into, I don't know whether you can see this here, but it's gone into the most amazing.
The colors. Yeah. So there's been that. Go ahead.
Okay, so you're about to do an online color class, aren't you?
Absolutely, yes. And if this goes out too late for people to actually join, then I'm sure Craig will sort out a link that people can go to the package afterwards. We'll get that link for you, Craig. But yeah, I'm about to do. I think it starts on I think it's the 16th of August. So it's sometime next 2 weeks time.
Yeah. People it'll have already happened, but we'll make sure and we'll post a link.
But they will be able to access it online even as this call goes out.
Yes, they will. Well, they'll be able to access the recording.
Yes,
it won't be live, but they'll be able to access the recording.
Benefit from the course.
Right.
Okay. Exactly. Yeah, right. And I can, you know, I'm going to go through sort of 3 or 4 colors a night and give them all the information they need and how they can use it within their session.
Right. Thank you. So just to wind down, because this has been fabulous, and of course it could go on and on. When people think about birth, is it always a trauma? Is birth always? It's not, because it's really the perception of whether there's helplessness, threat, etc., and all the different qualities. So we don't have to think that birth just in itself is a trauma. It depends.
It all depends. It depends on. But it also depends on the perception of the mother. So the example, I did an interview the other day, which reminded me of this is, and I wrote a blog about this, is like 2 guys that were born in Iraq during the first Gulf War. Both their mothers were giving birth while the bombs were being dropped. You know, like big stuff was going on. One mother was completely in faith. She trusted Allah. She knew that she was going to be safe. She knew her baby was going to be safe, and she trusted Allah that all was going to be well. Whereas the other mother was like fearful, terrified, there's bombs going off, I could die at any moment. And when these 2 guys got together and discussed their birth, you know, like one is like super confident, you know, feels super safe in the world, and the other one, you know, is quite anxious and is hyper alert and looking for danger everywhere. So
perfect
that's an example for you.
Thank you. This has been wonderful. It's been great. I thank you to everybody that's listening and watching. Hopefully this will give you a sense of really the kind of work that we explore about how trauma affects our lives from the beginning right up until the present. That's what Tapping Out of Trauma is. It's a course for tapping practitioners to really have a deeper understanding of different aspects of birth. So this has been a great introduction. We really appreciate your time. The Tapping Out of Trauma course will be starting on September 14th. It's an online training, but you have to have an EFT background to take it. So you can find that at tappingoutoftrauma.com. And it's just been a delight. I mean, I really just want to express my gratitude and appreciation for your time, for your energy, for your skill, for your stories, for your passion, for all of that. It's just been a joy having you here.
Thank you, Craig. And I tell you, it's not just EFT practitioners that need to do this course as well. You know, birth professionals, you know, you could roll this out and make this even bigger, because, you know, we all need to understand the impact of trauma on their lives. So I'm going to thank you guys for,
thank you.
You know, helping those people to understand more about trauma.
Great. Thank you. And thank you, Suzanne, for helping.
Yes.
Yeah, great. All right. Take care, everybody. Bye-bye.